get up and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, brought a little Louis the 13th. Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head. My road shop niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day prepping America overseas. Pension for the workers, nigga please. Embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement. I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut. Foreclose with big homes at the tenement. I twist words like a speech impediment. I hope you got good credit, bitch. If not, better get a new job with benefits. While I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with. New money buys brand new carrots. My old money brought your great grandparents. You got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya. I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to Voice of Rebellion Radio. This is Chris J, and it is 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Sunday, the first one of 2016. Welcome, everybody, to UCY Radio, Voice of Rebellion Radio. We have no one else in studio today, so it'll just be me. I encourage everybody to join the chat room today, and hopefully you will. We have seen this week has turned out to be very interesting. This weekend, an event that if I would have made the show not Wednesday, or actually I think I made it Friday. However, if that was before all these events went down in Oregon, I would be able to maybe make a show dedicated to that. However, I think I still would want to do this topic. Maybe I'll talk about it a little bit during the show. We've had quite a bit go down, in 2015 into 2016, especially when it comes to our topic. I'll talk about, these heroes of the third world, these leaders, that lifted their countries away from the imperialism of Europe, the imperialism of the United States, lifted their country out of poverty caused by the imperialism. And we're talking about just the decolonization around the world, its efforts, even though that it seems that it'd be going very slow pace. Slowly but surely, I think we're starting to reach towards the point of decolonization of the third world from South America to Africa to Asia. In South America, I would say they've made big progress. They went to... Now they have most of the leaders in South America oppose the United States government, oppose the Israeli tyranny on Palestine and around the world, and the Zionist agenda. They oppose the New World Order agenda. They oppose their banking system. They've been working on it for a long time now, and it's about to, I think, come into fruition. Maybe under Maduro will bring it in this year. May UNASUR will finally. It's been founded a while back. Another like a BRICS type project, but it was actually with South America. An alternative to the World Bank. UNASUR, I think, could actually become a operating bank very soon. And I think with somewhat of a stabilization after 2015, it's very possible, considering 2014 was very unstable for South America. And even going into early 2015, it was a very rough time for a lot of South America. Not by the leaders of South America, but the leaders of the United States, the CIA, the Mossad, fascists across the country that the United States and fund these madmen to cause instability in their countries, and there was a few elections that happened, and the thing is that the right wing, the Zionists, still control a big part of South America's media, so they're able to influence these minds of this impressionable middle class, and the problem is that they actually believe that they can become richer when it never has worked out. And these governments the right wing in South America, we're talking about the fascists, and the fascists have had a history of South America. They made every country that they have been a leader of, they create mass poverty, they create mass terror, they kill dissidents, they work with the United States to kill revolutionaries, and they throw people away for years on end, and then execute them in terrible prisons. And I would say still, you don't want to go to prison in South America, but it's a lot harder to end up there nowadays than it used to be. The corruption system in Chile, the corruption system in Brazil back in the day, just all across South America during Operation Condor, which was the United States attempts to fund these fascist governments, and then they did. They kept these fascist governments always up to the 90s. In Venezuela, for example, lasted all the way up to the 90s, the fascist dictatorship of Carlos Andrés Pérez, who he led from 79 until the mid-80s, and then again in the late 80s, the mid-90s, and then kind of his apprentices kind of ruled in between. You could say it was directly, the Andrés Pérez dictatorship was just 70s, 80s, 90s, and then it had the horrible events of the Carazaco involved in there, and that was during just the peak of South America's colonization. But now that the media has been able to tell the middle class, the right-wing media has been able to tell the middle class that in South America, that if we vote these right-wing puppets again, that apparently everybody will be rich, everybody will be there will be no political disagreements, or I don't know what they're even trying to say, really, because at this point, there's been so much progress in South America. The poverty's shot way down in most of these countries. Venezuela has the second biggest poverty reduction, second most poverty reduction in South America, and Bolivia has the most poverty reduction in South America. With Evo Morales, who's really the one last stable government in the region, it seems like. I mean, the problem is that the United States has funded so much instability. I wouldn't say he's the last stable one, because there's also Uruguay is pretty stable. And I would say at this point, I would say you could say that probably Ecuador is stable at this point too. And those three right there could lead UNISOR into its creation. If UNISOR is created, it will completely change the future of South America. And they really not right now need to stick together and oppose any attempts to become recolonized by the World Bank. Venezuela kicked out the Rothschilds. Bolivia kicked out the Rothschilds. I know definitely Venezuela did retrieve their gold. That was a big one that Chavez did. And Hugo Chavez was, he did a lot for, he led really, he was the spark of all the South American revolutions happened in the 21st century. And it was his election in 98, now seems a whopping 18 years ago. Just so much has changed there. Really sparked it off him. And originally there was a Dominican Republic president that he was kind of the predecessor and started the movement, but really Chavez gave it that spark to get it going. And just all of South America awakened to the fact that all their leaders were corrupt U.S. puppets, and they couldn't take it anymore, or else they would be permanently in poverty. In Africa, they had Gaddafi was the main one. And Gaddafi, he kicked out the Rothschilds. He had a giant gold supply. He was going to put Africa on a gold currency that'd be against the Rothschilds and free Africa from the enslavement of Europe after centuries and centuries and centuries of being enslaved. But he was killed shortly before his plans actually took place. He actually had some of the gold dinars printed. He was going to make this large union for Africa, the world's largest continent. And I don't know if he would be able to get all the leaders in Africa on his side. I think that's the one skeptical thought about the whole plan, is that not everybody in Africa was supportive of, not even close. It's still ruled by many neo-colonial puppets to this day. Really, to my opinion, there's only two really strong anti-imperialist leaders in Africa at that time, and it was him and Mugabe. Mugabe's just been an unfortunate victim of economic warfare by the elites, been an unfortunate victim by the super rich of the United States and around the world, have been doing any of these attempts, creditors trying to take down Zimbabwe, the World Bank trying to take down Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe stayed tough. And it's funny, Mugabe is stuck to his guns as being leader. And one time, an interviewer said, "Mugabe, you're 89 years old. Isn't this time? Wasn't or 80 or 90? I think it was when he was 89 years old. Wasn't this election a good time to retire?" And he was like, "Do you ask only African leaders that, or do you ask the Queen Elizabeth as well?" And she has a lot of power herself. The monarchy never gets unelected. Remember, Zimbabwe has elections, whereas Mugabe has been able to narrowly beat out a party which, people say that he's a racist, people say that he's a black supremacist, many other things. Well, he's just taken back stolen land that the Europeans, the British had stolen a long time ago, and they've kept it. It was illegally gone land in the first place. I mean, these jokers on the opposition of Zimbabwe, they believe that was 1% of the population. They need more representation. They have about the proportion amount. They have like one guy out of 100 in the parliament. I mean, what more do they want, really? Zimbabwe has a very, very small white population, and so as long as the whites aren't being catered to in Zimbabwe, and I'm not even going to say the whites, because I think a lot of white people in Zimbabwe support Mugabe, and a lot of white people around the world definitely support Mugabe, and especially in Russia, and Putin has recently made some stronger ties between Russia and Zimbabwe. But as I'm saying, the super rich white landowners that that are trying to desperately hold on to their stolen land, they want more representation. They had representation they ruled the country all the way up to 1980, and during Rhodesia. And who the hell was Cecil Rhodes, where the country was named after? Cecil Rhodes was an imperialist dictator, practically, who pretty much I'm not going to say discovered that area, because it was obviously populated, but encountered that area on behalf of the British. And he was a British nationalist. He said that being born British is like winning the lottery of life. This is what he said. Which says a lot about Rhodes' character, and that's how he would treat people that weren't British. And Cecil Rhodes killed an estimated, some people say, 10 million Africans, and he renamed the country Rhodesia after himself, in a sociopathic action, in my opinion. Cecil Rhodes, the face of colonialization, his name lasted on the country all the way till 1980, where they lost their customs, they lost their culture, a lot of them, and they were just forced to live under the British rule all the way up to that point. And Cecil Rhodes, you renamed it Rhodesia, but remember, it was Zimbabwe for over 1,000 years prior to the renaming of the country after the murder. And same thing, there was the apartheid in South Africa for a long time, of course, where the British majority controlled the country, which, with South Africa during apartheid, had very strong connections to Israel, to no one's surprise. It just shows the Zionist, British, all these people that, ultimately the New World Order puppets, they all work together to colonize the Third World, steal their resources, put Rothschild banks into their countries. Mugabe, at first was actually somewhat pro-British, or at least acted to be, and the Queen actually wasn't too much opposed to him. But then he started doing the actions that he had intended to do, and then slowly he became, from the Western media, almost an ally in Africa to madman in Africa, Black Hitler, so many things that they've called him. Mugabe did so many good, he did so many things for his people. He was very nationalistic. He didn't really care what the rest of the world thought of what he was doing. and it's not like he invaded other countries. All he did was take back land. That's where really the hate speech started against him. Took back land that had been stolen long ago. Mugabe, he also freed the country from the IMF and World Bank and did many other things. And he's gained. I mean, it's funny that these people will be talking about especially, media's the fake corporate media from the West will be in the United States will be saying, "Oh yeah, as Mugabe's so unpopular in his country, everybody wants him to fall. Nobody supports him. While meanwhile in their own country, for example, like Francis Hollande, talking 14% approval rating or whatever for Hollande, and talk about how unpopular Assad is in his own country, Syria, where Assad, he has 70% of his people support Assad. You can't find that in any country in the Western world, pretty much. Britain probably Cameron's probably 30%, Hollande 14%, Obama 39%, maybe. It's Assad 70%, Putin 90% about. And it's not like he puts people at a gunpoint and forces them to register the poll. No, this is the actual support of the country. I'm telling you, the Russian people are very strong people. If they actually opposed Putin, they would have taken him out a long time ago. The Russian people stand behind Putin, and in the same thing in Zimbabwe and Syria with Assad and all these different countries. So the whole corporate mainstream media's narratives are so wrong on so many points, but that's the point. It's the brainwash the people inside the United States, and so many people believe the bullshit. People my own generation, they believe that like it's the goddamn, God-given truth or whatever. Like this was written on stone tablets and fell from the sky and gave them to Abraham. That's what they believe, the CNN stuff, that they see a CNN article or whatever that says that how little there might be something they could tell me almost on CNN that, oh, hamburgers are bad for you, and I'll doubt it just because it's CNN, something that normally I would see as 100% true. If I see on CNN, I'm gonna put 1% doubt in there somewhere, It's when it comes to the mainstream media, anything political, anything talk about foreign policy especially is going to be 100% false. Syria, they've been so wrong on so many times, and just everything is ass backwards on how they tell the whole story about Syria. They have painted out. They sometimes when they try to accuse somebody besides ISIS, when they talk about somebody receiving help from outside of the ISIS organization and other Islamists, they don't talk about actually who gives ISIS help. The United States government, Turkey especially right now is finally starting to come into the mainstream about Turkey's involvement with supporting ISIS. I was talking about that a long time ago. Saudi Arabia, they won't talk about them helping ISIS. Qatar, Bahrain, how even the United Arab Emirates, Israel, the big one. I mean, it's literally on the name. Israeli secret intelligence services. You could translate that ISIS. And people say, "Well, I'm crazy. Why would Zionists be helping? The supposed opposite, the Islamic extremists." Well, ultimately, ISIS is pretty much paving the ground for Greater Israel to be made, and they're taking out their enemy, Assad, who is actually truly Zionist and actually supports the Palestinian cause 100%. And not just that, let's not forget, the Palestinians like him so much they actually fight alongside with him militias in Syria. Remember the PFLP GC, Palestinian Front for Liberation of Palestine General Command, fights for Assad in Syria, and the PFLP back in Palestine supports Assad, which in my opinion, PFLP is probably the only non-corrupted group really in Palestine for different reasons. I would say Hamas, with their ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, practically a United States organization, and with what seems to Sorry, I fell off the air there for a second, and my dog's going berserk in the background. It appears when I try to go to the UCY chat sometimes, it goes, I'll be trying to talk to you guys for a second, and then hey, get back up. When go to UCY chat and then it cuts out the Skype. I don't know why it does. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That's a weird thing. We in the United States, it seems like we'll talk about the third world is sometimes just completely forgotten about. Nobody seems to care about the third world in the United States. Just that there just seems to be that complete apathy, and then there's terrorist attacks in the third world by Islamist United States government funded. Well, no one seems to care. But when it happens in Paris, everybody's changing their profile pics. Everybody changed their profile pics for that Paris thing, which I did feel bad for Paris because I know that it was carnage what happened there, and the fact that I think that, however, they're not talking about what really the truth is, that the spillover, that ISIS, is funded by the United States, France, all these Western countries. Also, let's not forget one major thing is that there was all these witnesses that were saying they were seeing white men coming out of cars that might be possibly just an intelligence operation to create fear and start to lock down France, which they succeeded because they locked down France and a lot of Europe afterwards with all these fears of terrorist attacks. Look, people think that in false flags, people cut it too black and white. They think it's either completely fake and no one died, or it's completely the government story. I believe that oftentimes in false flags, people do die, and they're just not killed by the people necessarily that were said to have been done the killing. I think that in the Paris thing, that's probably what might have happened. I think that it could have been Mossad, could have been ISIS themselves, but you have to remember again, it's a French, United States funded group, so it would make a lot of sense. But then again, it wouldn't make a lot of sense because then they were able to lock down Europe afterwards, and Europe's been practically in lockdown since November 13th, ever since that happened. It was a weird. I mean, I'm just saying there's some weird coincidences with that. Wasn't that Friday the 13th or something like that? Friday the 13th, 11, 13, 15. I mean, I'm not playing all this numerology stuff. I'm just saying when it comes to the marketing, the fear of it. It's like Friday the 13th, 11, 13, 15 attack. Everybody be afraid. We need to stop another attack from happening. Just put some horror movie announcer guy talking, saying that right there. And then now it sounds really terrifying. It sticks in people's mind. I think sometimes they do these events on certain times with certain coincidences because it's good for marketing. Marketing that fear, getting the fear porn into people. I mean, how many media channels afterwards, from France 24 over there to BBC to CNN to Fox to MSNBC, how many people were saying all this stuff, how we need to lock down our country, or refugees are going to, cause World War III to happen or whatever. Without talking about any of the real issues about how the United States government, ISIS commanders have said the United States government funds them. There's all these jihadists saying that the United States funded them. The Iraqi people believe, 80% of them believe that the United States funded ISIS. There's, Syria, just overwhelmingly they believe that. Assad talk about that, but nobody will listen to Assad. Nobody will listen to Khamenei, because to the United States people, there's this Islamophobia in them, and they won't listen to what quote unquote ragheads or whatever, raghead leaders is what they'll call them. And and I'm seeing afterwards that really the ugly side of a lot of people is this Islamophobia has really been shown. And guess whose numbers, of course, surged through the roof after the Paris attacks. I mean, Donald Trump comes right through the roof by playing on the fear porn. And it's all rigged practically, this election, the 2016 election, all these elections going back since the Federal Reserve has been made, because they're all loyal to the Federal Reserve, the people that print the money, and then the Zionists. JFK was the last real president, and you saw what happened. He got a bullet through his head. There's not much realness in our elections anymore, and to believe otherwise would just be ignorant. That that the one guy could either ruin or save America seems highly unlikely. I would say the United States is already. It's hard to ruin a country that's already been brought into the shitter by a government that's brought fascism, brought police state, corporatism, people working 80 hours a week just to survive in many places. And these aren't people working minimum wage jobs either. People with families, people that had college degrees working these kind of hours because a rich corporate elite hoards was 20 people who have some ridiculous amount of the wealth. I think it's 20 people have 50% of the wealth, while other 319 million or 318,999,800 people have to scrap for that last 50% of the wealth, or not the last 50%. Yeah, well, for the other 50% of the wealth, which is ridiculous. When half the wealth is controlled by those, and then we have 400 people controlling 80% of the wealth, and then keep going down the line a little bit, and then just probably a few thousand people, a few families, probably 300 families control 99% of the wealth in America, and then we scrap for the 1%. Here, it's not even we are the 99%. It's like we are the 99.99%. It's gotten in the state of the United States. I mean, it's funny that these people that in the third world actually believe that going by the United States model. Sorry, I dropped off again. I was trying to check the UCY chat. If I try something, I may have both open at the same time, or something like that. It seems like it drops off whenever I've been able in the past to be able to drop off or not drop off when I go to the chat room to see what's up, because 2 hours by myself will be a little bit. It won't be as fun as interacting with the chat room. I really like to interact with the people on the phone lines. That gets interesting at times. I've had some pretty crazy callers throughout the time. And to start off 2016, this is not exactly how I wanted to start off, but we just roll with it. What else has been happening? When it comes to Libya, it just seems to be one of the biggest disasters of the United States, trying to recolonize it, and they have pretty much recolonized it because they overthrew the Gaddafi government. But then again, the Gaddafiist movement is not over yet. They're actually fighting ISIS in Libya. That's what one of the main purposes right now of the anti-Gaddafiist forces. They have to get rid of the pro-Gaddafiist forces. They have to get rid of the ISIS, before they can try to retake their country and try to restall a Green Libya. Green Libya was a masterpiece. It was It was a country that where a lot of places food didn't even grow before. It was a giant water project. Gaddafi brought water out to the middle of the desert. I mean, he progressed his country so far. He had the highest, he made Libya the richest country in Africa, pretty much. Yeah, one of the highest human development indexes when he was one of the lowest before. It was a very poor third world country prior to Gaddafi. And then it became the richest country in North Africa and possibly all of Africa. In the world's largest continent, they were number one. And Gaddafi was able to bring, his people enjoyed a standard of living free of worrying about, working to survive. They were working to thrive. In Libya, a loaf of bread was something like 15 cents. I know oil was 15 cents a gallon there. They had programs where if you wanted to start a farm, you got something like $50,000 in farm equipment. That encouraged a lot of people to farm. And you got land. Unlike the United States government, like we're seeing right now in a certain situation where the government seems to be grabbing up land, not encouraging farming. Libya encouraged farming by giving land. And Libya was able to not really have dependencies on any large power. Libya was able to fend itself off in 86. However, we know that it fell in 2011 to NATO, which the conspiracy against Gaddafi was just crazy. They fund this movement in Libya that they made practically via the Facebook, and it was just it was a paid revolution from the protests being paid protesters to being paid mercenaries, and they unleashed terrorists into their country that later would kill Chris Stevens, and they overthrew Gaddafi in October. Well, he died in October 2011, and now it's 5 years later, and the country still hasn't stabilized. It's still in a state of civil war. Libya has been completely unstable since, been completely unreliable for predicting anything of what's going to happen next. All we can say is that there's going to be chaos, and there's all these rival factions and militant groups inside the country, and it's not necessarily it's Islamist groups, just militias inside the country, all kind of trying to control their local territory. At this point, it's like Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome in there. Yeah, most of them are Islamist groups, terrorist groups, and then there's the corrupt Libyan government. There's the Muslim Brotherhood, the even more corrupt Muslim Brotherhood version of the Libyan government. I would say they're about equally as corrupt. They have two capitals. The country doesn't even really have a government anymore. But then again, it does. It has two governments. And Libya was once a prosperous country just 5 years ago. It was so prosperous that instead of now, the beaches used to be a place where Europeans, tourists went to vacation, have fun. Now those beaches are where Coptic Christians are being beheaded by ISIS. Sirte used to be the hometown of Gaddafi, used to be kind of the birthplace of the revolution of Libya. Now it's the center of terrorism, and ISIS controls it. It's Tripoli used to be a capital rivaled by none in Africa, and very few around the world were like it. It was a tourist mecca. I'm not really playing on the religion there, but I'm saying it was a tourist heaven. It was great for the people who lived there. It was a fun town, and it was funny that they used to literally advertise in the West the vacation there. And then within a few years, they were calling for war on Libya. Gaddafi oftentimes saw these crazy inconsistencies with the Western rhetoric, and he would, in his speeches, he would use his eccentric, wild way of speaking in order to really call it out. I remember a speech he did against Obama. Talk about all this other, he was talking about, how close, at least the story of this guy, and how a lot of people had fallen. He talked about this in July 2008. How you can't fall for all the stuff that about him, that he'll make change, make revolution in this country, and how he described it is that he just was another part of the white establishment, or the Zionist establishment of America, the fascist establishment of America, and that he would actually try harder than the other people before, because he'll feel like that he said because he's black, he'll feel inadequate to be the leader of America, so he's going to try harder to be the opposite. And Obama's barely even, in my opinion, you can't even, he's mixed, for one thing. Number two, he's done very little for black America as they continue to struggle and continue to not be able to find jobs. And one of the main things is the police brutality that he's been barely able to call out. Well, he fixated on the whole Trayvon Martin thing, which that's a little bit different than police brutality, in my opinion, because Trayvon Martin, that was Neighborhood Watch. It's practically just an angry guy in the neighborhood that is paranoid a little bit, and then decides that he's going to roam around, and if he sees anybody suspicious, he's going to shoot somebody. It's a little bit different than state-sanctioned murder, like what happened with Tamir Rice, one of the worst examples. The guy playing, not even a guy, he's a 12-year-old kid playing with a toy gun in public, and then the cop comes over and pops him in 2 seconds. And then it's funny, it's so black and white on, oftentimes Black Lives Matter people will put in that, we'll talk bad about militias, and militias will talk bad about Black Lives Matter, and there's a few sensible people like me that both have good points when it comes to opposing the state brutality, the fascist brutality on the citizens of the United States. For one, I'm not generally supportive of a lot of Black Lives Matter, not compared to the people like the Black Panthers, the original Black Panthers. These are revival groups that might finally bring it back into reality. In the militias, it's like I'm not really supportive of them either, because these militias, there's been all these crimes committed by the United States government. They talk about that they'll overthrow the government when it becomes too corrupt. What are they waiting for? If they want to overthrow the government, now is the time. I support them and I don't really support them. It's how I see the two groups, and then it seems like it's just so black and white. Oftentimes even the activist community, who their minds are supposed to be superior, but at times they can't think outside the box. They can't think outside the box. They can't think outside the box some of them to any real extent besides. I don't even. It's like, for example, oftentimes the same activists will be on both sides will be the marijuana activists and saying that we can't see things so black and white when it comes to drugs, for example. But they can't see that issue difference between, they can't see it as not black and white. There's a lot of gray matter in there. There's a lot of people inside of these Black Lives Matter marches, groups not really connected to the Black Lives Matter movement, but for example, the new Black Panther Party, that are undesirable to the movement because they do just create division. They are black supremacists. Let's be real here. The new Black Panther Party, the Huey Newton Family Association, our Family Foundation has actually, or whatever it's called, has actually said that there's no connection between the old Black Panthers and the new Black Panthers. And don't get me started about some of these militias. There's the real militias. They're actually going for they're patriots trying to fight for independence from our government, a second American Revolution. And there's other people that want segregation afterwards, and they hate black people that also call themselves militias. We got to be realistic here. Going back to what I was talking about, is that people tend to see the third world as so black and white. That there's either
And oftentimes it actually is kind of black and white in some ways. Like in Syria, if you are against Assad, you and are fighting, you are a terrorist pretty much. There is no moderate rebels. There is no FSA. Well, there is an FSA, but they are not the ones that the media shows. They are terrorists. They cut off people's heads. They crucify Christians. They use chemical weapons. Al Qaeda, Al Nusra is pretty much the intermediary between them and ISIS, which obviously is who they are. And there's even these Western bloggers and stuff like that that try to downplay ISIS's horrible crimes against humanity, which is just absolutely sickening, and try to make Hezbollah and people and true anti-ISIS fighters as demons, devils, for just trying to show them as they've said all these things about Hezbollah, who have been one of the biggest fighters against ISIS. They've said all these things about Iran, and I would say Iran might have had the biggest role in smashing ISIS to this point, because they have a lot of troops in Syria, and they have some of the most experienced troops. Syria as well. However, the problem with Syrian army is that they seem to be a little bit undertrained, some of them, and that's why it takes these big amounts of soldiers to quell what is generally a rookie military group, ISIS. But ISIS does get training from Israel and the United States, and the Syrian army does get some training, I think, from Russia, which I would say the Russian military is just the best in conventional warfare. I'm going to try to go to the chat room again and see what happens, see if I can get over there. So far it says that the call's still going, so should be fine. And we're hopefully when I get over there, there'll be some good feedback, and then I can answer some questions or whatever, because we haven't gotten through part of the show, and I could say I could keep going talking, but I'm shit! I got kicked off the air again. That's the third time today. Which it's like every time I get kicked off the air, I start to I lose. It's like reading a book, and then you don't even get to put your bookmark in there. It's ridiculous, and it's like before I even get to do so, put a bookmark on what I'm thinking, what I'm doing. I find out I've been kicked off the air. Then I have to get back on the air and start all over again the process. I get a lose track. I'm like, oh shit, I have to get back on there, and then all of a sudden, I don't know where I'm at on the show at this point. Now I don't know what I'm going to talk about. Again, I always talk about Yemen, talk about the Houthis, which is funny because the United States, these people seem to lose track of all the names of the groups, and they can't tell one from the other. I mean, they changed their names, like in Syria. They've been FSA. The terrorist group is no longer named the FSA. Now it's also like the Syrian Democratic Front, and now Al-Nusra is now named the Arab Coalition or something like that. I mean, they changed their names, and of course ISIS, the Daesh, the Takafiris. They all change their names so many times. I think it is in a way just to confuse people from the outside, and confuse support from people that, for the world. I think it's the United States redesignate names so the people in the United States remain completely confused, and they'll just support whoever their idiot box tells them to support. And there shouldn't be eating an ice cream sandwich while airing. That's a little bit distracting. That is good. But Iran, they tried to actually intervene a little bit with the Yemen conflict, and all they tried to do was bring humanitarian support to the Yemen was already battered by war. Now it's just been completely battered by war. I mean, it's been going on since March 2015. Now we're January 2016. They tried to bring the ship across the line. The United States made a line around Yemen saying that if anybody crosses, that's pretty much, they will attack them. And the Iranians went back down, so we almost had like a Cuban Missile Crisis scenario happening. However, the United States left, and Iran went in, and then we just got that close to, World War III happening. And I think that we're really close to World War III happening in Syria. And the fact that it didn't happen in 2015 is a little bit surprising to me, because I thought it was gonna go down then. But I've been pretty close on my predictions so far, and I think that we did get the calls for full-out invasion in 2015 like I expected, and now I think they'll be acting on it very soon, next few months. We'll be seeing Syria will be in flames, and the United States will be trying to put in a pro-Rothschild puppet in charge, and after that, the fate of Syria, I mean, they'll just be like another Saudi Arabia or something. An Arab country with a Sharia law government, and completely enslaved to the bankers. Saudi Arabia is completely enslaved to the bankers. Those people, those King Hassan, yeah, they're rich, but they're not Rothschild rich, and the Rothschilds ultimately control the Saudi Arabian family. Rothschilds probably have 100 times more money than the Saudi Arabian royal family, but and they both are trillionaire families. I mean, the Saudi Arabia royal family has something like $1.3 trillion. The Rothschilds, when you count all the banks that they own and everything else that they, pretty much all their equity around the world that they have, it's somewhere between 500 and 700 trillion dollars. I mean, they're well in the trillions. I think it's to no one's surprise that the Syria stuff has gotten so escalated. The Syrian crisis around when I first started, I mean, at first it didn't seem like the United States would have too much involvement in it. Well, it always seemed like it, but it didn't. It wasn't sure how distant away the invasion would be, and now the invasion's here. It's 2016. It's going to happen this year. If not this year, it's going to happen next year. But it's going to happen definitely by. It's going to happen this year. If it doesn't happen this year, something drastic changed in their game plan, I would say, or there's been a massive slowing down of the game plan, because the game plan is for Syria, and they're going to draw Iran into the war, and they're going to take out Syria and Iran both at the same time, and they'll probably find a way to deal with Yemen as well, as those are the last anti-Rothschild governments in the Middle East. They have conquered Bahrain. They have conquered Qatar. I mean, all these countries were made to be pro-Rothschild, pro-New World Order. All the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia. And it's sad that Saudi Arabia, people still support in the West, despite that all these cries for help that these Saudi people have been giving to the West. I mean, just recently they killed that Sheikh Al-Namir, the Shia. They killed a top Shia leader. They killed the top Shia leader, and now, since they killed the top Shia leader, they cut the ties with Iran because the Iranians were so pissed off. They stormed their embassy in Saudi Arabia, and since they know that the Iranian people, the Iranian government, nobody in Iran likes them. Yeah, they're going to cut the diplomatic ties and act like it's Iran's fault. I mean, there's even people. I went on a Ron Paul page, and there's people supporting Saudi Arabia on there. These people are complete idiots. And what are you doing on a Ron Paul page supporting Saudi Arabia? Because Ron Paul was so against Saudi Arabia and Israel. I mean, he blamed it for most of the Middle Eastern problems and the United States problems in the Middle East, which is ultimately the Rothschilds' plans is what the United States problem in the Middle East is, because they're going to be used as the United States as the proxy of military to invade the Middle East. Until we end the Fed, the Rothschild bankers control the United States, and they have controlled the United States since 1913. It's a short time of not controlling the United States. In 1963, when JFK issued silver certificates instead of Federal Reserve notes for 6 months. But at that point, they quickly figured a way to kill him in Dallas, and then they blamed it on a lone nut, Lee Harvey Oswald. And they were able to also push their Cold War agenda by saying that he was indoctrinated by communism, which was just so convenient. Then after that, a super pro-Israeli president came in charge also and reinstated the Fed 2 days later to its full power. LBJ also, JFK was going to send monitors to the nuclear plant in Israel and prevent nuclear Israel from happening, because that is the true threat to the Middle East. I'm not just done with this ice cream sandwich. My bad, I shouldn't have ate it in the middle of the show, but it's a good way to keep the throat not sore. Because usually when I get to about an hour and 30 minutes into the show, start to get the sore throat. But today, probably not. We're about an hour, 10 minutes. I've been off the chat room for about 10 minutes. If anybody's had a question, that's why I've ignored it to this point, because I just haven't seen it. Man. But the decolonization efforts, there's been in Asia, I would say now, Malaysia has actually put Israeli Supreme, or is put in their Supreme Court or whatever, has put Israeli war criminals on trial. They've put that was not in their Supreme Court, but it was a major court. Supreme Court, there's a major court, I guess it would be like a circuit court or whatever. They put also in that court, along with the Israeli war criminals, Obama and Bush, which of course are not there to actually be arrested in Malaysia. So that's why they're not, it doesn't really mean much. But if they ever came to Malaysia, they would be arrested. Malaysia has also wanted to join BRICS. They've been super supportive of the Palestinian cause. They really, turned, I would say, on the West, and now Malaysia has really decolonized itself. At the same time, I would say that Indonesia, there seems to be a growing movement against the United States imperialism, like they had back in the 50s and 60s. It's kind of funny. Their president it's like that's a symbol of how, enslaved by imperialism they are. They look like the president that represents the United States. The power that's occupied their political sphere for a long time. Really, ever since Suharto took power, the fascist dictator, it's been a United States satellite practically, and their president even looks like Obama. And it's been a interesting history from Indonesia. They had a bright future when Sukarno, who sounds like Suharto, was the opposite of Suharto. Sukarno, who was part of the non-aligned movement, tried to work with Nasser, Tito, and these other leaders that rejected both the Warsaw Pact and NATO towards a independent, sovereign Indonesia and an economic prosperous one that would support the poor people in Indonesia in the future. They actually were able to achieve somewhat an economic prosperity. However, Suharto brought the country down, and during his infamous dictatorship, Indonesia fell right back into a third world country. Then afterwards, they just went through this transitionary period where they've suffered a third world government scenario. It's not really a question of stability. It's just a question of potency, and the question mainly, it's also corruption. I mean, it's really never left the system of Suharto, and it just continues to be the system of the United States that controls the Indonesian. The Philippines is the same way. The Philippines, they've never left imperialism. So ever since the United States left in 1945, they've suffered from neocolonialism. Neocolonialism has been a driving force in Manila's politics ever since, and they've just been that's why they continue to suffer the third world, and most of the probably natural resources that they actually have is being exported out of that country. That's the United States didn't leave in 45; they left in 46, I believe, totally. And then after, so they're a country that actually came about in the post-World War II era, like most of Southeast Asia. India didn't come till post-World War II era. Southeast Asia, same way. Most of those countries, and ever since a lot of these countries have to suffer through neocolonialism. Some of them have been into decolonialism, like right now at this point, Cambodia has actually started to reject the imperialist policies, and they've moved towards kind of like a Malaysian-style government. I would say Malaysia. It's no coincidence that two of the airliners go down, one by disappearance and one shot at the Ukrainians. It was not the East Ukrainians. The only people that I'm back. I'm back online. Right now, I know my audio had cut off for a little bit. It probably was from the chat room. I don't know how long I was off the air. I'm hoping I wasn't. I was talking for the entire 15 minutes. Some people said they hadn't heard me in 15 minutes or whatever. I'm back on the. Anyways, I'm back on the airways. Hopefully, right now at this point, everybody can hear me. I would say that. I know now Vince might host a call, so I was trying to interact with the chat room at the same time as talking to everybody. At the same time as talking about what I was talking about. Well, anyways, let's talk about we're very close to becoming a military junta. We're very close, and I would say that Jesse Ventura kind of demonstrated that pretty accurately via his whatever you want to call it, documentary or whatever. But he was able to, that was one of the most. I would recommend that. It really woke me up to the fact of. I didn't wake me up because I already knew about FEMA camps, but it really just it strikes at home that yes, there's these FEMA camps happening. Yes, it's not a conspiracy theory, and you need to tell your friends about them. You need to wake people up about it because they're going to drag a lot of us. They're going to send, I'd say, Muslims, immigrants, Hispanics, blacks. I would say homeless people are already being sent to these kind of facilities, FEMA camps around the country. What else I would say? Dissidents of any kind, of course. The leaders of these dissidents on the radio need to right now realize that the FEMA camps are nearing, and people might be thrown away soon. And I'm not trying to bring the fear mongering into this. I'm just trying to put reality so nobody's caught off guard. And the people that are not really awake, they're listening to this show and thinking I'm crazy. We'll just look around. There's 800 of these facilities built around the country. They have pictures all over the place. No, they're not what people say Amtrak stations or pictures from other government facilities. These are regular government facilities, but these are FEMA camps. They've been built ever since Rec City 4. They started building them by the authority of the immigration ICE, as it's known, the immigration authorities in the United States of origin, to house large amounts of immigrants after they illegally got in this country. They put them in there as punishment. These FEMA camps probably have hard agricultural work, possibly re-education camps, and possibly might have other forms of punishment. I mean, just imagine 800 Guantanamos around the country. That's what this world's facing, or this country's facing in the future. They have 3 in Florida for the people that are listening here in Florida. So, if you were interested, I would say that to anybody that anybody that also thinks that that's one that they think is a big conspiracy theory, and then there's people also think that they used to think that the NSA was a conspiracy theory, that all the government communications are being watched, all our internet communications are being watched by the government, and now every electronic communication is practically being recorded by the NSA, is what we were told by Snowden. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. They're watching everything. They're watching the internet. They're watching your cell phones. They've been recording every call since the 80s. They're watching this internet show. You watch porn. I find it funny. That's what it finally takes for Americans to wake up, is that they're that the porn that they've been watching, the government knows about what they've been watching. They're not worried about. They're not worried that when we're talking about serious stuff, like now the government knows that we were talking about how weapons of mass destruction in Iraq were fake. Now that you sent that message to your friend. No, the people care that now that the government is knowing about their videos of weapons of mass destruction made by whatever that Ron Jeremy guy or whatever. That sounds like a real porn title right there. If somebody hasn't taken that title, somebody should. I'm not into making those grease films, but anybody that's in there, you can credit me later and send me a few bucks after you make a movie like that with that title and get rich. Just credit me a little bit with giving you the idea. Anyways, we're on the last 20 minutes of the show here. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Again, it might be the location of where I'm at. There might be a little bit of problems with the audio. I went solo for most of the show. So far, I've went solo with the show, so I've had made a little bit of problems there. We are looking at the decolonization around the world, and in Africa. I mean, I can't Mugabe. I love talking about that guy. In some ways, is the fact that what he's been able to do for Africa, and the fact that he's been able to make such desolate, poor country. The Zimbabwean people love him. And there's the me hatred campaign is like no other practically. I mean, only Gaddafi. I mean, it's towards African leaders. They really put this me hatred campaign into Middle Eastern leaders as well, and to South American leaders. Practically, they really do that to, a me hate campaign to especially the brown leaders that the United States government doesn't like. And Mugabe, well, he's not brown. He's black. I mean, he's very black. But people say, call him Black Hitler, Black supremacist. And again, is taking back the land that the British stole a long time ago. Is that supposedly an act of supremacy? No, it's them doing what's right. And this land was stolen by these murderers a long time ago that killed 10 million of their people, and now they're giving it back to the Zimbabwean people. Now the white minority in Zimbabwe, I don't even think the white minority in Zimbabwe really supports. But the white minority in Zimbabwe, I think, really supports actually Mugabe. As they also, I think there's a super white rich opposition to Mugabe that wants to hold on to the land they've stolen so hard that they control. They control a big part of the media. That was such with such a stranglehold of the media that the super rich have. I mean, it's no wonder that they continue even in countries where the right wing is extremely popular or unpopular. They've been able to take control again because of the fact that they control the media a lot of places. They control the media, even in countries that the left wing has control of, the media they seem to hold on to. 60% of Venezuela, that the right wing still controls the media. And I think even in Zimbabwe, some of them, they still control the media to an extent. And the right wing, it's the pro-white minority party, whatever it's called, for the movement for democracy. It's supposedly a democratic party when it's already a democratic country with where all people's votes actually count. And I think it's just like the Patriotic Revolutionary Front or whatever, Mugabe's party, and they're accused of all this other stuff. Mugabe is now. I mean, they try to also talk about his rumored demise coming up, that he would be dead in 2013 or whatever by his 90th birthday. I mean, he is now in the 90s. I mean, and people also talk about supposed homophobia, which, yes, that is true. He is not very fond of gays. I think that, in fact, that it's beyond. I mean, I think that it's not like even like Putin. Putin's not homophobic. Mugabe may be a little bit. However, let's remember he's from a completely different generation. He grew up in literally the 1930s of Zimbabwe, Africa. He's looking at a different perspective, possibly. Russia, it's not necessary. It's in Russia. There's not. It's a propaganda tool. The supposed human rights abuses against gays, but.
All right, let me add this call. Perfect timing. Every time somebody calls my phone. All right, I'm bringing Chris in for you guys.
Hey, we're back.
There you go,
We
bud.
shouldn't have any technical difficulties for the rest of the night. I was talking about, though, people, Mugabe, the anti-colonialist leader and the African nationalist, the anti-British, anti-American, anti-Zionist, anti-New World Order leader that is in Zimbabwe. They talk about his homophobia or whatever, and I think that's because he sees it. Yeah, he sees it as an agenda towards Zimbabwe, pushing this supposed acceptance. It's not just accepting, gays as equals in Zimbabwe. What the West wants is to push a cater to them in Africa, to continue making it seem like after these African leaders are pressing somebody is what they're trying to do. This is what they do nowadays. Now they, instead of saying that they are godless or communist or whatever like they did back in the day, now they're going to say that they're bigoted, they're communist still is what they're going to say. But they're not going to necessarily say godless. It's like now it's a little bit changed the social mentality of the West, so they use a different tactic towards the people. What the media says to demonize Ahmadinejad or Mugabe or these other leaders of the third world countries that stood up to imperialism, that stood up to colonialism. Mugabe is probably he's the last really original anti-colonialist leader, that goes way back to the 80s that's still left in Africa. I mean, at this point, there's really nobody left. I mean, is Egypt, long time since Nasser. Sisi really isn't, he's kind of a fencer when it comes to, he's anti-American, it seems like, but when it comes to Zionism, he seems to sit on the fence, might be mildly anti-Zionist. It seems like a lot of the activist community really seems to demonize him heavier than maybe what he should be, but he is still, for the most part, I would say he's no Nasser, he's no Gaddafi. There's also, as well, I mean, down in South Africa, it's the times a little bit changed. I wouldn't call the current leader of South Africa anti-colonialist really too much. And Eritrea has actually stood by the Yemeni government to this point, surprisingly. But then again, they have a lot. They used to be pro-American actually back in the day, so they're questionable. And there's a lot of problems with that government. Also, they have maybe the worst press freedom. This is what people say, the worst press freedom in the world. I said that was a Western source that I saw that on. That was on Wikipedia I saw it on, which that is a Western source. I see Wikipedia slanted, even though it's supposed to be edited by the people. It looks like to be edited by right-wing people, to be edited by internet fascists sometimes. They seem to be pretty soft on a lot of the Ukrainian stuff, Ukrainian right-wing parties, but then quick to call out East Ukrainian leaders and stuff like that. They are, with Zimbabwe, they've said all this horrible stuff, and Iran, they say a bunch of terrible stuff about them without, it seems to be so biased to one side. And Syria, just now they start to talk, on Wikipedia, I see stuff about Turkish supporting of ISIS, but it's so clear now. I mean, I think even a lot of America at this point thinks Turkey supports ISIS. I think I think a lot of the world now, it's so obvious about them, but nobody will talk about Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, the United States, Israel, and all these other forces that have funded ISIS. And the fact that they work hand in hand with the Syrian rebels in Syria, which are not Syrian rebels, they're terrorists. These people that they've been funded by the United States to take out the decolonialistic government of Assad, who's worked with Russia, but they're not in any way shackled to Russia. And Assad has brought up his country significantly with his Ba'ath Socialist Party. And
during that time, he brought Syria to a modern country, very much like Gaddafi. And I would say in many ways, Assad and Gaddafi resembled each other. Gaddafi, however, I mean, there was no other leader like him in recent times. Gaddafi, who went, it's kind of, he went all the way from 1969 to 2011 as leader, and was popular the entire time in his country. And he had one time where he was bombed by the United States in '86, and he was taken out by the United States and NATO in 2011. They had killed one of his kids, I think, and then they killed more of his kids in the 2011 war. I mean, they really just psychologically tortured Gaddafi. And it's just a shame what the West did to Gaddafi and did to Libya, really, as general. As the people in Libya will now have to forever suffer the consequences and the United States people cheered it on because the media told them that Gaddafi was such a bad man. And they really won with his media campaign against Gaddafi. Oh, Gaddafi, he oppresses this people here. He oppresses this tribe or whatever. Gaddafi brought that country from a brutal monarchy, an oil monarchy that was supportive of Israel, to what it is now, or what it was in 2011. But now it's completely changed. Now it became it's ran by terrorists. It's ran by it's ran by rivaling factions of each other. It's ran by two corrupt governments. Two corrupt governments that are fighting for power. Libya is no longer what it used to be. And Libya is a giant country. It's not like it's a small country with not much influence. It's a country probably over half the size of the United States with, and they have pretty good influence of had pretty good influence of Africa, and of course Gaddafi. The main thing was he was going to finally end neocolonialism in Africa by putting everybody on the gold dinar, liberating Africa from the international bankers once and for all. But they couldn't have it because he would have practically, with the African Union, made a country more powerful. The continent would have been one country, and it would have been made the most powerful country on the planet. I mean, with the same currency, I guess you could say it would have been the same country. The African Union was supposed to be almost like the Soviet Union, but not with all that mess. It was supposed to be the African Union was supposed to be a new thing, and it was supposed to be like the same kind of unity the Soviet Union had with the different republics and the different African republics of Africa would have been in the African Union. I mean, there's many different countries there, many different cultures, but it had all been united under the gold dinar. Gaddafi comes from a very different culture than Mugabe did, but they got along pretty nicely because they were both anti-colonialist leaders in Africa. Gaddafi, he was Muslim and the Arabic part of North Africa, and up there in Africa, in the northern part, that's Muslim. But when you get down into the more central part, going to Zimbabwe, that's Christian, and that's pure black. While up there, that's more kind of mixed in tan people. That's kind of the bridge right there. Egypt and Libya right there. That's like the bridge between, and even Algeria. It's a bridge between Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And the Middle East had ties with Gaddafi. When we talk about Assad and Iran, and they didn't want to trade oil in dollars. And Gaddafi would have ended the system of trading oil with dollars because everything would have been traded in the gold dinar. And the gold dinar, and that's the main thing, is just the currency. No longer having a Rothschild-backed currency for the entire continent. Gaddafi was more ambitious than any other leader practically that we've seen in recent history. I mean, maybe Hugo Chavez, who had a similar ambitious plan for South America. It was UNASUR. I'd say UNASUR, it could actually happen, though, still. And unlike, the African Union plan that looks like for now is tabled, and, even if the Green Libya government comes back, it looks unlikely that they'll be able to do such a thing. I think it was unlikely with Gaddafi because the fact that not all of Africa was on board with Gaddafi, but it still was possible under Gaddafi because Gaddafi had that kind of power over Africa. However, I don't think that I don't think UNASUR is out of reach. I think UNASUR could happen this year, or and it would be a glorious thing for South America. It would finally bring South America to economic independence, and that'd be one of the things to ending colonialism. That's one of the big steps to ending colonialism is ending economic independence and not being chained down by money that in a false economic system that the United States government enforces, but the Rothschilds are ultimately the ruler of. The Rothschilds have control of most of the world's money, but there's a few countries they don't, and that's the ones you see them trying to create war with and trying to create problems with. They have something to demonize these countries. Even Hungary, there's a lot of demonization towards them about the whole refugee crisis. That they were pointing the blame at them for not taking in refugees. But while we here, are we really doing something better here? That we take in a few refugees here and there, while we blame European countries for not doing it that really can't handle it. While as the United States, one of the richer countries on the planet, you run the richer governments on the planet, they really cared about people, which they don't. They could actually take care of those refugees, but they won't. But you expect poor European countries that are just trying to get their economic problems under control to deal with it, and they point the blame here and there and there. But what about their buddies in Saudi Arabia? What about their buddies in in Qatar and all these other in the Gulf states? Why aren't they taking in refugees? While our African countries, they take in tons of refugees. There's one that's taking in like 1 million refugees. Some of these African countries have more. I think there's one. I think it's a country in Africa that has the most refugees taken in the world. But But again, the Rothschilds always find an excuse when it comes to why a country is fucked and why they need to be invaded. When it comes to countries that don't have their banking system in their country, they say this bigoted. They say that they're doing imperialism when the United States is doing imperialism in Ukraine itself, and Syria, and Iraq, and Afghanistan, and country after country after country against Venezuela by funding fascists to go on their streets and trying to do a coup attempt. They just did one a year ago. Not even February 2015 they tried to do a coup. They've done 2 coup attempts. They've been unsuccessful to this point. I think I predicted that there'd be another coup attempt before it would happen in 2015. And I didn't predict it would be happening in 2015, but I think I predicted in 2014 that another coup attempt would happen, but they would revert it, and they did it. But they've been meddling in Venezuela's affairs, but they'll accuse Russia of imperialism. And then one last example is, of course, the Syria with Assad. They say that Assad treats the minorities badly when his military protects minorities from annihilation by ISIS, Christian minority, the Kurdish minority, all these different minorities. And who's to be talking about minorities when they kill 12-year-old minorities for pointing a toy gun in the United States? Or what about the fact about all these other unarmed black men that have been killed by police are just all they're talk about minorities not being treated well. Look at the United States. Look at what the Mexicans, where this guy goes on cheering, that calling Mexicans rapists, calling Mexicans, bad people in general. And then a lot of this country supports that guy. Donald Trump was a sociological experiment to see how racist, how is the vile things of the system got to the people of the United States? Are they as fascist as they want them to be? With Donald Trump and their support of Donald Trump, it's apparent that it is, yes. As he seems to be the most popular, if not the most popular candidate, he's definitely the second most popular candidate in the race right now. It's not really a race, it's like a beauty pageant. The beauty pageant isn't the win. You don't pick the people who vote aren't the people. It's a judge practically, but it's not a beauty pageant. It's a
it's an evil pageant practically. It's a who's willing to be the biggest puppet for evil causes and for wars and for enslaving people via the financial system pageant. That's what it is. It's not an election. It's not an open election for sure. You could call it an election all you want. You could call whatever election, but it's not an open election. Venezuela has open elections. Any international organization will practically say so. That's not biased, and people getting a receipt by paper and it does the electronic, the electronic paper. It's very for the fraud their system, and of course the fact that it's funny. The one time the opposition wins in Venezuela, they say that they don't say that the election system is rigged, but the 16 times that they lost fair and square to the government, PSUV, the popular movement of Venezuela, they say it's rigged. There's the hypocrisy, but they're just talking heads being funded by the United States government, king of all, double talk, spin on what's really going on with the world affairs, how things really are, and South America, Africa, Asia. They just turn things on their head for these leaders that turn things on their head for the United States, the anti-colonial leaders, and they'll just continue lying about them. But just remember that this is what usually is about when it comes to Mugabe or Gaddafi. Anyways, we're in the last minute of the show. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Hopefully next week I got a big treat for you. We'll see. And also, good thing we got our bumper music back going on today. Good Immortal Technique. At the beginning of the show, that was Immortal Technique. Rick around the world, and we have Immortal Technique. Point of no return to end the show. Thanks, Vince, for showing up here in the last.
Point of no return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds him. Immortal Technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return.